The knife is still in Denise Carter's hand when Camille walks into the kitchen, and for one full second, nobody moves. Camille freezes in the doorway. Her mother stands at the counter, gripping a kitchen knife she isn't using, staring down at a stack of papers instead of the vegetables in front of her. The tomato beside the cutting board sits untouched, bleeding juice onto the counter. Denise's knuckles are white around the handle. Her eyes lift to Camille's, and for a moment there's something there Camille has never seen on her mother's face before. Fear. Not fear of Camille. Fear of being caught. "What is that?" Camille says, nodding at the papers. Denise sets the knife down slowly, like she's remembering it's still in her hand. "Nothing you need to worry about tonight." That answer is wrong. Camille has known her mother for 29 years, and Denise Carter has never once said the word nothing and meant it. She crosses the kitchen and reaches for the top page before Denise can slide it away. Guardianship petition, her name typed in the top field, a blank line beneath it, waiting for a signature. "Mom!" Camille's voice comes out flatter than she expects. "Whose baby is this for?" Denise doesn't answer right away. Somewhere down the hallway, a door creaks open, then shuts softly, like someone doesn't want to be heard moving through the house tonight. Camille's stomach tightens. She isn't imagining it. Someone else is here. "Before we proceed, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is." Denise finally speaks, her voice smooth again, back in control. "Brielle needs this baby, Camille. You have one you weren't even planning for." The room goes cold in a way that has nothing to do with the air conditioner. Camille sets the paper down like it's burned her fingers. She isn't pregnant, not yet. Not that anyone in this house should know about. Not the appointment she went to 11 days ago. Not the test results sitting in an unopened envelope in her glove compartment. "How do you know that?" Camille says. Denise doesn't blink. A mother knows things. That isn't an answer either. Footsteps move closer down the hallway. Slow, deliberate, not rushing. Camille turns toward the sound. A man steps into the kitchen doorway, tall, dressed in a dark wool coat that doesn't belong in a Southside row house on a Tuesday night. He isn't someone Camille has ever seen at a family dinner. He isn't someone her mother introduces to the church board. He stops just inside the doorway and looks at the papers on the counter, then at Camille, then back at Denise, and something in his face goes very still. "You didn't tell me she was here," he says to Denise. His voice is quiet, controlled, the kind of quiet that makes a room pay attention instead of relax. Denise's jaw tightens. "This isn't your business, Mr. Park." Camille looks between them. "Somebody needs to tell me what's going on in my own mother's kitchen." Nobody answers. The man Park, her mother called him, studies Camille for a long moment, like he's recalculating something in his head. Then he does something strange. He steps back, giving her space, the way a person does when they've realized they walked into a room mid-argument that isn't theirs to referee. "I'll come back another night," he says. "No." Camille's own voice surprises her. "Whatever this is, I want to hear it now." Denise slaps her palm flat against the counter, sharp enough that the knife jumps an inch. "You will not raise your voice in my house." "Then tell me why there's a guardianship form on your counter with my name on it before I even told the family I was expecting." Silence. Real silence. The kind that has weight. Denise's mouth opens, then closes. For the first time in Camille's life, her mother doesn't have a ready answer. Park watches this exchange with the stillness of a man used to watching people lie to each other and waiting for the truth to slip out sideways. He doesn't interrupt. He doesn't offer to leave again. He just waits, arms loose at his sides, like patience is a weapon he's comfortable holding. Denise finally speaks, choosing her words the way she chooses her offering envelope on Sunday. Careful, deliberate, designed to look generous. "Brielle has lost 3 pregnancies, Camille. 3. The doctors told her last month there won't be a 4th try. You're healthy, you're strong, you can have another one someday." She can't. "So the plan was what?" Camille says. "I carry a baby, and you two decide what happens to it before I even know I'm carrying it?" "We were protecting the family." You were planning behind my back. Denise's eyes flick, just briefly, toward Park, like she's checking whether he's judging her. He is. He doesn't say so. He doesn't have to. His silence does the judging for him, and Denise seems to feel it, because her shoulders straighten like she's bracing against something. Your sister could adopt, Camille says, and the second the words leave her mouth, she watches her mother's face change. Fast, like she struck a nerve she didn't know was exposed. Adoption takes years, Denise snaps. Home studies, waiting lists, background checks. Brielle doesn't have years, she has now. So the solution is to take mine. Nobody is taking anything. We're discussing options. You had a signature line ready, Mom. That's not a discussion. That's a plan with my name already typed on it. Denise doesn't answer that either. Park shifts his weight slightly, and the movement draws both women's eyes. I think, he says slowly, I came here on the wrong night for the wrong reason. What reason did you come for? Camille asks him directly. He hesitates just long enough for Camille to notice it. Business with your mother's church. Property paperwork. Nothing that concerns you. She doesn't believe that either, but she lets it sit for now, because there's a bigger fire already burning in front of her. Denise reaches for the guardianship form like she's going to fold it away, hide it, pretend the last 5 minutes didn't happen. Camille gets there first. She picks it up herself, scans the page top to bottom, and stops cold at the second paragraph. Her father's signature is already on it. Samuel Carter's name, dated 3 days ago, sitting in the witness line like it's already settled, already agreed, already done, without a single conversation with her. Camille's hands go still. Her whole family, it turns out, has been having a conversation about her body and her child without inviting her to it. She sets the paper down slowly, the way you set something down when your hands might shake if you don't. I need to leave, she says quietly. Camille, I need to leave, Mom. She turns for the door. Park steps aside without a word, giving her a clear path, and something about the way he does it, careful, unhurried, watching her rather than her mother now, makes her pause for half a second in the doorway. He isn't looking at her like a stranger looks at a woman he just met in a stranger's kitchen. He's looking at her like he's already decided something matters here that he hasn't said out loud yet. She doesn't ask what. Not tonight. She walks out through the front door into the cold October air, gets into her car, and sits there with both hands on the wheel. Engine off, porch light glowing steady through the windshield exactly the way it always has, as if nothing behind that door just cracked wide open. Her phone buzzes in the cup holder. A text from Brielle. Mom said you're on board. Thank you. You have no idea what this means to me. Camille stares at the screen. She never agreed to anything. Nobody asked her a single question tonight that wasn't already answered before she walked in the door. She sets the phone face down on the passenger seat and looks back at the house one more time. At the kitchen window where her mother's silhouette is still standing at the counter, at the second shadow beside her, taller, still, unmoving, the man in the dark coat who came for church paperwork and stayed for something else entirely. She doesn't start the engine yet. She just sits in the dark, replaying the guardianship form, her father's signature, her mother's face when she said the word adoption, and the way the stranger in the doorway looked at her like he already knew more about tonight than he was willing to say. Whatever just happened in that kitchen, it was never about tonight. It was already in motion long before she walked through that door, and somewhere inside her, a small, cold certainty settles in that this was only the first move in something much bigger. Subscribe to see how this unfolds, and comment where you're watching from. I'd love to say hello and see just how far this story takes us together. The number doesn't change no matter how many times Camille refreshes it. She's sitting in her car outside the hospital, thumb pressed to the screen, watching the balance load, disappear, load again, $211.40. She laughs the first time, actually laughs, because her brain insists this has to be a glitch, some server hiccup, some delay in a deposit that hasn't posted. She refreshes again. 211亿美元40美分. Again, 211亿美元40美分. Her breathing changes before her mind catches up to why. She scrolls the transaction history and watches 11 days of her savings disappear in 6 separate entries, and somewhere around the 4th one, her hands start shaking hard enough that she has to set the phone down on the passenger seat and just breathe, both palms flat against the steering wheel, engine off, the cold seeping in through the windows. The phone rings in her hand before she's ready for it. Unknown number, she answers anyway. Miss Carter, this is fraud prevention at your bank. We're calling to verify some recent activity. Yes, Camille says, and her voice comes out smaller than she means it to. Please, verify it. By the time she hangs up, she knows the shape of it, if not the whole truth. Someone with her old login moved money out in pieces, small enough not to trigger an automatic freeze, timed just far enough apart to look almost natural. She knows exactly one person who has ever had that login. She calls her mother, and for one long moment, Denise says nothing at all. I don't know what you're talking about, Denise finally says. Don't. Camille, I don't understand why you're calling me upset. The bank has your device on the login history, Mom. Stop. A pause. Then, softer, almost bored, like she's tired of a conversation that's gone on too long already. Oh, that, Camille repeats. And something in her chest goes very still and very cold. I was going to tell you, Denise says. When the time was right, Camille closes her eyes. She doesn't ask the next question, the one about whether there was ever going to be a right time, because she already knows the answer, and hearing her mother say it out loud tonight feels like more than she can carry. I have to go, Camille says, and hangs up before Denise can start explaining herself into something that sounds almost reasonable, because that's the part that scares her most. Her mother's excuses always start to sound reasonable if she listens too long. Inside the hospital that night, Camille checks vitals on a newborn 3 hours old, small and warm, dark hair damp against the blanket. She adjusts the wrap around the baby's shoulders, and her hand drifts without permission to her own stomach. She pulls it back fast, like she's touched something hot. She doesn't cry at work. She's good at that, holding it until she's alone. But in the stairwell between the 2nd and 3rd floor, where the fluorescent light buzzes and nobody walks through after 8, she sits down on the concrete step and lets her hands shake the way they wanted to in the car, presses the heel of her palm against her mouth so the sound doesn't carry, and just breathes until it passes. Her father calls near midnight. She almost doesn't answer. I didn't know the extent of it, Samuel says, before she can say anything. Your mother told me it was a short-term loan. I believed her. Did you ask to see anything, Dad? A statement, a repayment plan, anything? Silence answers that question better than words could. I should have, he finally says. Yeah, Camille says. You should have. She doesn't yell. She doesn't have the energy left tonight. She just lets the silence between them sit there until he says goodnight and hangs up first. 2 days later, she visits a lawyer 3 blocks from the hospital, a woman named Patricia Alvarez with tired eyes and a direct manner Camille appreciates more than she expects to. It's recoverable on paper, Patricia says, scanning the statements. Whether it's recoverable in practice depends on what your mother still has. Suing family is never just about money. You understand that going in, or it'll break you halfway through. I understand, Camille says, though she isn't sure she does yet. Then let's file the report first, decide about the lawsuit after. That evening, back at her own apartment, Camille sits at her kitchen table with the Navy notebook open in front of her, adding tonight's number to years of smaller ones. Car repairs, overflow wedding costs, church envelopes that appeared out of nowhere, every time Denise made a promise she hadn't budgeted for. She stares at the running total for a long time before closing the notebook and turning off the light. She doesn't hear from Junho. Not a call, not a message, nothing since the night in the kitchen when he stood in the doorway and said almost nothing at all. She tells herself she isn't thinking about that, and mostly, she believes it. 3 days pass in a strange, brittle quiet before Denise calls again. Her voice different this time, thinner, almost frightened. "I need you to come by," Denise says. "Tonight if you can." "Why?" "There's something I need to explain about why I needed the money so fast." Camille sits with the phone against her ear for a long moment. "Why did you need it so fast, Mom?" "Not on the phone," Denise says. "Please, Camille, just come." Something in her mother's voice makes Camille's stomach tighten, a note she's never heard there before. Not manipulation, not guilt, something closer to fear. She drives to the house that night with the folder from her lawyer still sitting untouched on her passenger seat. Denise meets her at the door before she can knock, ushers her inside fast, glancing back toward the street like she's checking whether anyone followed. "What is going on?" Camille says. Denise sits her down at the kitchen table, hands trembling slightly as she pours 2 cups of tea neither of them will drink. "There are things about this family you don't know," she finally says. "Things I've been protecting you from." "Protecting me how?" Denise opens her mouth, then closes it, like the words are too large to fit through the doorway of what she's willing to say tonight. "There's still another way to fix what's happened," she says instead, changing course, retreating to safer ground. "But it isn't only about the money anymore." Camille's whole body goes cold. "Then what is it about?" Her mother looks at her for a long moment, and for the first time in Camille's life, Denise Carter looks like a woman who is genuinely afraid of what she's about to say next. She doesn't say it. Headlights sweep across the kitchen window from outside, slow, deliberate, a car that doesn't belong on this street pulling up along the curb. Denise's face drains of color entirely. "You need to leave," she says suddenly. "Right now." "Mom." "Camille, please, go out the back." The back door sticks, and for 3 long seconds, Camille can't get it open, her hands fumbling with a latch she's used 100 times before, while behind her she hears a car door shut out front, slow footsteps on the walk, her mother's voice pitched high and strange through the wall, greeting someone like she's greeting a debt collector she's been dreading for weeks. The latch finally gives. Camille slips into the dark backyard, presses herself against the siding, and looks through the kitchen window from the outside instead. She doesn't see a stranger. She sees Marcus, hands in his jacket pockets, standing in her mother's kitchen like he has every right to be there, speaking low and fast while Denise nods along, pale and tight-lipped. Camille doesn't hear the words. She only sees her mother reach into a drawer and hand him an envelope. She waits until his car pulls away before she lets herself back in through the front. "What was that?" Camille asks. Denise's hands are still shaking as she wipes down a counter that's already clean. "Nothing that concerns you. You told me to run out the back door for nothing that doesn't concern me." Denise doesn't answer that. She busies herself at the sink instead, and Camille watches her mother's shoulders, the tight line of them, and understands there's a version of tonight her mother isn't ready to give her yet. "Fine," Camille says. "Then tell me what you were about to say before he showed up, about the money not being the only problem anymore." Denise sets down the dish towels slowly. When she finally turns around, her face has settled back into something calmer, more composed, the mask sliding back into place like it never slipped at all. "I carried you for 9 months," Denise says, voice gentle now, almost tender. "Your sister has carried grief for 4 years. One child was given every kind of blessing, the other wasn't. As a mother, how am I supposed to choose which daughter deserves less pain?" "You're not supposed to choose at all, Mom. That's the point. Sometimes fairness isn't equal, Camille. Sometimes it's about who can carry the weight." Camille feels something in her chest go very quiet and very hard, because this isn't cruelty dressed up as reason. Her mother believes this. Genuinely, completely believes she is being fair. "Say it plainly," Camille says. "What are you asking me for?" "Let Betrayal raise this baby. You'll have others." "She won't." The room tilts slightly around the words. Camille doesn't shout. She doesn't cry. Not yet. She just stands very still in her mother's kitchen, and feels every year of quiet sacrifice rearrange itself into something with teeth. No, she says, and the word comes out steadier than she expects. Tommy, no. I have spent my whole life being the daughter who gives, so nobody else has to feel what giving costs. I sold my violin at 10 years old so Brielle could have a bicycle, and you told everyone how generous you were. I worked weekends so Dad's back could heal. I handed over money for a wedding overflow I never got invited to help plan. I am done being the answer to this family's math. Denise's mouth tightens, but she says nothing. For the first time, Camille watches her mother run out of ready words. Camille drives home that night with her hands trembling on the wheel hard enough that she has to pull over 2 blocks from her apartment, park along the curb, and just sit there. Both hands pressed against her face, breathing in short broken pulls until it slows. She doesn't cry pretty. She cries the way you cry when 8 years of quiet math finally comes due all at once, ugly and loud in an empty car with the heater ticking. Her phone buzzes against her thigh. Unknown number. Camille. Junho's voice, low, careful. I need you to meet me. Tonight, if you can. Why? A pause, longer than she expects. I think your mother is in trouble. What kind of trouble? I don't know yet, he says. That's why I need to see you. She meets him 20 minutes later, in a parking lot 2 streets from her mother's house, the black sedan idling under a broken street lamp. She gets in without hesitation this time. He doesn't say much at first, just studies her face in the dim light, taking in whatever the last hour has left written there. You've been crying, he says. I'm fine. I didn't ask if you were fine. His voice isn't gentle exactly, but it isn't cold either. I asked what happened, she tells him. The kitchen, the 9 months, the choosing. Somewhere in the middle of it, her voice cracks and she has to stop and start again. And he doesn't fill the silence while she does. Doesn't rush her, just waits with the same stillness she noticed the very first night in that kitchen doorway. When she finishes, he's quiet for a long moment, staring out through the windshield at nothing. My company donated to your mother's church, he finally says. $240,000 over 18 months. Some of it never made it into any account we can trace. Camille stares at him. You think my mother took your money too? I think your mother is connected to something larger than a family argument. I don't know how large yet. He looks at her, and something in his expression shifts. Careful, almost reluctant. I wasn't going to show you this tonight, but I don't think you should walk back into that house without seeing it first. He reaches into the inside pocket of his coat and pulls out a single photograph, old, slightly creased at one corner, and sets it on the dashboard between them without a word. Camille looks down. Her breath stops in her chest. Her mother stands in the photo, younger, maybe 8 years younger, standing beside a man Camille has never seen in her life. And in her mother's arms, wrapped in a pale yellow blanket, is a newborn baby. Written on the back, in handwriting Camille doesn't recognize. 3 words and a date. March 2018. I don't think this is the first baby your mother has taken, Junho says quietly. Camille's hands go numb around the edges of the photograph, the parking lot outside the window blurring at the edges of her vision, and for a long moment she can't make herself ask the only question that matters. Camille wakes already exhausted before her alarm even sounds, the way you wake when your body knows before your mind does that something is wrong. She lies there for a moment, telling herself yesterday was the worst of it. The kitchen, the word blessing used like a weapon. 9 months carried, offered up like it belonged to someone else. She tells herself there's nowhere further down to fall. Then she opens her front door for the mail and finds the envelope taped to it instead. Hand-delivered sometime in the night. No stamp, no warning. She reads the first line standing barefoot in the hallway, cold tile under her feet. Notice of intent to file for emergency guardianship. Her stomach drops straight through the floor. She keeps reading, and the next lines aren't about money at all. They're about her. Ground cited, emotional instability, poor judgment, association with individuals connected to organized criminal activity. Camille sits down right there on her own doorstep, envelope shaking in her hands, and for a moment she can't get air into her lungs properly. This isn't a fight about $61,000 anymore. Her mother is building a case that says Camille herself is the danger. She calls Patricia from the floor of her hallway, voice cracking before she even finishes the first sentence. She's saying I'm unstable, Camille says. She's saying I have poor judgment. She's using the word dangerous like it's a fact. Breathe, Patricia says. We'll answer every line of it, but I need you steady for what's coming. That afternoon, a box arrives at Camille's door. No note. Inside, a soft yellow baby blanket, still folded in tissue paper, and a card in her mother's handwriting. For when she comes. I only ever wanted what's best for this family. Camille stares at the blanket for a long time, feeling something twist in her chest that has no clean name. Kindness and threat, wrapped in the same paper. That's always been her mother's way. Love with strings sewn into the seams. Her phone rings an hour later. Brielle crying before Camille even says hello. I begged her not to file, Brielle says, voice breaking apart. I told her this wasn't what I wanted. She looked at me and said if I truly loved my future child, I'd stand beside her on this. She made it sound like refusing her was refusing my own baby, one I don't even have yet. And what did you say? I said no. Brielle's breath catches. For the first time in my whole life, I told her no, and she looked at me like I'd betrayed her. Camille, I don't know who she is anymore. I don't think I ever really did. Camille sits with the phone pressed to her ear, feeling something soften despite everything, because her sister's voice sounds like a woman finally waking up from a very long sleep. Thank you for telling me, Camille says quietly. It isn't forgiveness. It's a start. That evening, Camille leaves her shift late, walking to her car through a mostly empty lot, and notices a sedan parked near the exit with its engine running. Two men inside, neither of them looking at their phones, neither of them talking, just watching. She quickens her pace, heart hammering, and doesn't breathe easy until she's locked inside her own car with the doors sealed. She's still shaking when she reaches her apartment building, and Junho is already there, leaning against the wall near her door like he's been waiting. They followed you from the hospital, he says, no greeting, straight to it. I had someone behind them the whole way. They won't come back tonight. Who are they? I don't know yet. His jaw tightens, the only sign of how much that answer costs him to give plainly. But somebody wants you scared enough to make a mistake in that courtroom. I'm not going to let that happen. He doesn't explain further, doesn't list names or theories, just steps between her and the empty stairwell as she unlocks her door, standing there until she's safely inside. The next morning, Camille finds her apartment slightly wrong. Nothing broken, nothing stolen. Not her laptop, not her jewelry, not the cash in her kitchen drawer, but her closet door stands open a few inches more than she left it, and the framed ultrasound photo that sat on her nightstand is gone. She stands frozen in her bedroom doorway, staring at the empty space where it used to be, feeling the floor tilt beneath her. She calls Junho immediately, voice barely holding steady. Someone was in my apartment. They didn't take anything valuable. They took the ultrasound. Silence on the line, long enough that she can hear her own heartbeat in the gap. Don't touch anything else, he finally says. I'm coming. Patricia calls 20 minutes later, before he even arrives, and her voice carries a different kind of alarm. Camille, I need you to sit down. I'm already sitting. The judge moved the hearing. It's not in 5 days anymore. Patricia pauses, and Camille can hear papers shuffling on the other end, the sound of a plan being rebuilt too fast to feel steady. It's tomorrow morning, Nina. Camille's whole body goes cold, standing in the doorway of a bedroom that no longer feels entirely hers, staring at an empty space where a photo of her daughter used to sit, less than 24 hours from walking into a courtroom to fight for the right to keep her. The courtroom is fuller than it was for the emergency hearing, every bench along the back wall occupied, word, having traveled through the church and the hospital. both that something bigger than a custody dispute is about to unfold in room 4B of the Cook County Courthouse. Camille sits at the plaintiff's table with Patricia beside her, hands folded so tightly in her lap that her knuckles have gone pale. Across the aisle, Denise sits beside Whitlock in the same charcoal dress she wore to the last hearing, chin lifted, but Camille notices something different in her posture today. A stiffness. The look of a woman bracing for a blow she can sense coming but can't yet see the shape of. The judge enters. Everyone rises. When they sit again, the room settles into the particular hush of people who understand they're about to watch something that matters. Patricia rises first this time, and she doesn't rush. Your Honor, before we discuss custody, this court needs to understand exactly what kind of pressure Camille Carter has been living under for the past 4 months. She lays the first document on the table. Bank statements. Device logs. A forged signature pulled from county records that doesn't match Camille's handwriting in a single stroke. Then she calls Marcus. He walks up slowly, glancing once toward the back of the courtroom before he sits, the same nervous glance he's worn for weeks now. Mr. Whitfield, Patricia begins, were you aware that funds taken from your mother-in-law were used to satisfy a personal debt? Yes. His voice is barely above a whisper. To whom did you owe that debt? Silence stretches long enough that the judge leans forward. Answer the question, Mr. Whitfield. Reggie Doss. Marcus's hands grip the edge of the witness box, and when he continues, his voice is shaking. I don't deserve to be up here saying this like it makes me better than I am. I let a scared old debt turn into something that hurt a child. I told myself it wasn't my business, that Denise had her reasons, that Camille would understand eventually. I'm only telling the truth now because I found out this morning there was another baby, another family. And I realized if I stayed quiet one more time, I'd be part of hurting a second child the same way I almost let this one get hurt. I don't deserve forgiveness for that. I just couldn't carry it anymore. The gallery stirs. Camille feels her stomach drop at the words "another baby," said out loud in a room full of strangers. The photograph from that first cold night in Junho's car, suddenly no longer just hers to carry alone. Patricia lets the moment breathe before she speaks again. Your Honor, this brings us to evidence uncovered during our investigation into the petitioner's financial history. 8 years ago, a photograph surfaced showing Denise Carter with an infant that was not her own. Our investigators traced that photograph to a woman who has waited 8 years for answers about her son. The courtroom doors open at the back, and a woman Camille has never seen in person walks in, uncertain, hands twisted together in front of her, eyes finding Denise across the room and holding there. Your Honor, Patricia says quietly, this is Renata Osei. Camille watches her mother's face collapse in real time, watches recognition and dread move across it in the same instant, and understands she is about to hear, for the first time alongside every stranger in this room, exactly what her mother did to another young woman years before she ever turned her attention toward her own daughter. Renata takes the stand, voice trembling but clear, describing a 19-year-old girl, alone, pregnant, desperate, and a church volunteer who promised dignity and delivered disappearance instead. A baby handed over under a name that was never legally binding. A family that moved states within months. A decade of silence that Renata carried alone until an investigator knocked on her door 3 weeks ago and told her, gently, that her son was alive, was loved, was 10 years old now and asking questions about where he came from. I believed her, Renata says, looking at Denise now, not at the judge. I believed you when you said you were helping me. You didn't help me. You erased me. Denise stands up before her own lawyer can stop her. I gave that boy a good life, Denise says, voice cracking loud enough to fill every corner of the room. I gave Renata's baby a family who could actually raise him. I gave Brielle hope when 4 years of doctors gave her none. I have done everything for this family. Everything. Miss Carter, you will sit down. Somebody had to make the hard choices, Denise says, tears falling freely now, no composure left to hide behind. Nobody else in this family was willing to do what had to be done. Nobody. I was the only one strong enough to carry it, and now you all sit there and call me a monster for it. The room goes silent in a way that has nothing to do with courtroom procedure. Camille watches her mother, finally, completely exposed, still believing, even now, that taking was the same thing as giving. The judge calls for order, waits until Whitlock gets his client back into her seat, then turns her attention to the second row of the gallery, where Junho sits quiet and still. "Mr. Park," the judge says, "before I rule, I'd like to understand your relationship to this family. What is it that you do?" The room stills completely. A deputy near the door straightens. Somewhere behind Camille, a woman whispers a surname to the man beside her, and his face changes the way faces change when a name finally connects to something they've only heard mentioned in careful silences. Jun-ho stands. "I own Park Global Logistics, Your Honor." He doesn't explain further. He doesn't need to. The judge studies him for a long moment, something unreadable behind her eyes, glances once toward her bailiff, then back. "Thank you, Mr. Park," she says, and moves on. And the silence that follows says everything the words themselves left out. The ruling comes an hour later. Full custody remains with Camille. The court refers the fraud, the forged documents, and the case involving Renata's son for full criminal investigation. Denise is escorted from the courtroom without a single member of her family walking beside her. Outside, on the courthouse steps, the family that remains stands scattered in the cold November light. Samuel finds Camille first, and his voice, when it comes, is thinner than she's ever heard it. "When I signed that first paper, I told myself I was protecting my family," he says. "I didn't realize I was signing against my own daughter. I don't know how a father spends 30 years thinking that's the same thing." "It's a start, Dad," Camille says, and this time she means it fully. Brielle stands a few feet away, arms wrapped around herself. "You spent your whole life paying for my happiness," she says quietly. "And I never once asked who was paying the bill. I'm asking now. I'm sorry it took a courtroom and a stranger's stolen son for me to finally see what it cost you." Camille doesn't answer right away, but she reaches out and takes her sister's hand, and for the first time in months, Brielle doesn't flinch at the silence that follows. She just holds on. Junho waits at the bottom of the steps, and when Camille reaches him, he simply pulls her in, steady, careful, and she finally lets herself cry without holding any part of it back. 6 months later, in a hospital room on the third floor of St. Catherine's, Camille holds her daughter for the first time. Small and warm, dark hair damp against her forehead, one fist curled tight against her cheek. Junho sits carefully on the edge of the bed, and when the nurse places their daughter in his arms, his hands go still around her, that same controlled stillness he carries into every room, except now it isn't guarded at all. "No one will ever ask you to earn love," he says quietly. "Not from me. Not ever." Madam Park appears in the doorway, silver hair pinned neat, and touches her grandson's shoulder. "You smile more now," she says. "I have more reasons," he answers. Later that night, once the room quiets, Camille reaches for the navy notebook in her bag, opens it to the final page, and writes one line beneath years of numbers that used to define what she owed people who called it love. Nothing taken without asking. Everything given by choice. She closes it, and for the first time in her life, Camille Carter isn't anyone's answer anymore. She's only her own. If this story reminded you that you're allowed to say no to the people who taught you to always say yes, hit subscribe and turn on notifications, because this channel brings you a story exactly like this one every week. Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. And tell me honestly, if you were Camille, would you ever let your mother back into your life at all? Someone reading this tonight needs to hear your answer. Thank you for staying until the very end of this story, and I'll see you in the next one.